We've got all kinds of electronic things around here.
Yes.
Susan Grisanti, that's not a West Texas name.
No, that's Italian. My father was Italian, and my mother's French, German, and Irish. And my grandfather, Grisanti, came from mid-Tuscany, a little town called Gramignana in Italy in 1904. And they were actually statue makers back in Italy. And they had a recession depression in the 1890s. Couldn't make a living making statues anymore for the churches, so they came over here in 1904 to Ellis Island. And my side of the Grisantis settled in Cleveland, Ohio. And then the other Grisantis settled in Memphis, Tennessee. And my grandfather had a restaurant in Cleveland called Casa Grisanti's. And it was one of the most well-known restaurants at the time, back in Cleveland in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And where my parents lived, my grandparents lived, my dad actually remembers Hope's Meat Market across the street from their house. And he remembers a slightly older gentleman named Bob Hope, who used to play with my uncle when they were kids.
Wow. Wow. In Cleveland?
In Cleveland, Ohio, yes.
Wow. Well, how did you get to Lubbock, Texas?
Well, back in 1981, which is further back than I want to admit, I had a master's degree in classical guitar, and I had an option to go to Florida or California or come to Texas with some friends, and I always loved horses. I always loved the Texas feel, and so I made that decision in 1981. And I came here to actually work on a PhD in classical guitar at Texas Tech University. I worked on that part-time for about 4 years, and then in 1985 I decided to open the studio here in Lubbock, Texas. So that's how I got here.
So you teach and perform?
Yes, I do. I have the teaching studio here. I also teach online, and I also perform a lot of different places, a lot of different venues.
How do you teach online?
Well, I have a chord speller theory program. It's online, and it's a unique music theory teaching program for all instruments. And I'm also starting to do Skype lessons online, too.
And you make your living this way?
Yes. Yes, for 25 years. I've been full-time since November of 1985 in the music business.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much.
A lot of musicians want to do that and don't.
Well, thank you. Well, after I had invested so much in my degrees and my instruments, I decided to go for it in 1985. There was a market here for that, and I loved West Texas, and so it's really miraculous that it worked out. I have to thank God for that.
How did you get started teaching here?
Well, I actually started teaching back in the late 70s in college as a teaching assistant, and I actually started playing in 1970. I played air guitar by the stereo for a year and drove my mother crazy, and she bought me a $25 guitar with the strings about 6 inches above the neck, and I knew from the first guitar lesson that that's what I wanted to do.
That's great. And you were how old then?
I wish I could say I was -7, but I was actually 13.
Well, to have your life...
So please don't do the math.
To have your life course planned out by the time you're 13 and know what you want to do, that's a big deal.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. And so you're here in Lubbock, and you say since '85 you've taught?
Yes, full-time, yes.
Yeah.
And then also the performing, yes.
And how did you get established as a teacher and a performer?
Well, I actually started, I'm actually now here at Park Tower at the High Rise in Lubbock. And before that, when I first started in 1985, I was at 15th and Avenue X, which was then known as the Overton Ghetto. And I had bars on my windows and forelocks on my door. And I just started advertising, and I had 30 students there. And I was there for a year and a half. But I wanted a place that was, had better lighting and more security and just a better environment. So a producer from San Francisco actually came through town and found my business card in 1986. And he looked all over town and he said, "Susan, you need to move to Park Tower." So his name was Jerry Freeman. And he has since passed away, but I always have Jerry Freeman to thank for the idea of moving my studio here to Park Tower.
Where did you earn your degree?
I studied at the University of Akron for my bachelor's degree, and then Baldwin Wallace Conservatory in Cleveland for my master's degree. They train a lot of Cleveland orchestra musicians too, and I studied there with Dr. Loris Chauvignon, who's a very well-known guitar teacher in that area.
So you have heroes that you learn from and
Yes.
respect and admire, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and one of my greatest influences here was Dr. James Bogle at Texas Tech University. I studied with him for a number of years, and he was really influential in helping me shape my style and a lot of my different styles of music that I play.
You play classical guitar. What type of classical?
I play actually all types of classical guitar. I play South American, Spanish, flamenco. I was going to play some flamenco today, in fact. And then I play Bach and just the traditional. So I do the whole gamut.
And you like Rodrigo?
Yes, I love Rodrigo. I actually played the Rodrigo Concerto here with the Plainview Symphony a few years ago, and I would love to perform that again. And I also play electric guitar. I teach all styles, and in my workshops, and sometimes out at the jams like Texas Cafe and the Spoon, I also play electric guitar with my songwriting. So I do pretty much the whole gamut.
Well, you perform, you play kind of in the background, say at weddings or
Yes.
receptions or whatever.
Yes.
And then you play full front.
Yes.
At other venues.
Yes, I toured as a solo concert player with the Texas Arts Commission for 12 years. And I have to put just a little brag in here. I'm the only Texas Tech music student who toured 12 years as a soloist with the Texas Arts Commission. So I have that feather in my cap.
Do you practice?
Yes, I do. Not so much on my older material because I've played that so much. On newer material, I still work a lot at it.
Do you perform a lot, Susan?
Yes, I do. My last performance here was for the Legacy Arts Center for the First Friday Art Trail, and I do a lot of weddings, a lot of parties, private parties, just the whole gamut.
Well, tell me, when did you start writing?
I started songwriting in 1997, and I had played classical guitar for 27 years at that point, and when I started songwriting, I thought it would be classical music, but it wasn't. I guess it was the Texas influence. I started writing country songs and jazz and pop, and I was going to do some of those today, in fact. So my songwriting is actually not classical.
That's great. That's really neat. You know, in symphony orchestras, you got so many violins, so many horns, one guitar player.
That's right. That's right. It's a lot of pressure, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's probably why you don't meet many classical guitarists, because there's not many jobs, right?
Well, it's a highly, highly, highly competitive field, and you have to really find a niche. And I probably worked the equivalent of 4 full-time jobs for about 20 years. But I was determined. I think the main thing is persistence and determination. And also it's more of a calling. If you know that you're going to do it and no one's going to stop you, that's the number one thing. And then the persistence and determination and people that help along the way. The serendipity, things that happen are wonderful.
Oh yeah, like what?
Well, like meeting you, for example.
Oh, well. Well, I would love to hear some of your talent.
Okay, wonderful. This is Romanza on classical guitar. Bye.